welcome to this session, everyone in the room, and obviously those online as well. My name is Philipp. I'm here together with Stefan, and we will be talking about OKRs in times of crisis. So basically, how can we leverage outcome management and the framework of OKRs in order to achieve not only our strategic targets, but efficiency targets as well. But before we jump into the topic, maybe one or two sentences to us too. You want to start?
Sure. Hi, I'm Stefan. I'm a quantitative researcher at WorkPath's newly founded Discovery and Insights team. And I'm having like a small research block in the end. But first, Philipp will enlighten us.
Thanks, Stefan. So as I said, my name is Philipp. I'm with the customer education team at WorkPath. So responsible for everything around training and enablement. As you hopefully by now know, our offer is not just the outcome management platform, but end-to-end the platform on the other side and training and enablement on the other side. So let's take a look at what we got prepared. We want to talk about, in general, just open up the topic. What is a crisis? And how come we focus on efficiency in there? And where's the connection to outcome management in this context? Then we definitely need to do a little recap of the relevant elements of the OKR framework. We won't go into too much detail, just a teaser about the, from our point of view, most important elements of the framework, which can actually help in achieving your efficiency targets. Two of those will be the next ones on the agenda, so drafting and alignment. Then we will jump to the statistical insights, which were, I believe, teased one or two times already over the course of the day, which Stefan just mentioned. So we will learn from a method point of view how it could work, hopefully convince you that it makes sense. And then Stefan will enlighten you with a couple of, with a small teaser, a couple of data and facts, numbers and facts regarding what we found out, what behaviors actually drive your goal achievement, including efficiency targets. All right, so let's jump into the topic crisis. Definitely a buzzword. Everyone talks about crisis all the time for quite some time right now. So we won't bore you with a very sophisticated definition. We picked a fairly simple one, good enough for this topic, for this session right now. It's basically a time of great difficulty. Difficulty can mean a lot of things. So we want to find out, what does crisis actually look like for you? So if anyone wants to be the one speaking up, please feel free. So thinking back on the first time anyone in your company mentioned crisis, did the strategy actually change significantly? Are the deduced requirements from the strategy actually different than before? And most importantly, do you need to achieve your still existing goals with less resources? Is anyone going to be brave enough to speak up? Otherwise, I'm assuming it's basically a rhetorical question, right? So most companies we work with, and I'm assuming yours as well, didn't actually change the overarching strategy significantly from one day to the other. They didn't actually change the requirements from one day to the other. So the requirements and the strategy more or less stayed the same. But what changed was we had less resources, and we do still have less resources at hand to actually achieve those requirements. When I say resources, I mean people and money, obviously. So the situation in the times of crisis, like right now, is basically we still have too many requirements and we still have too few resources to achieve those. So basically, to be honest, nothing new from a generic point of view, but the delta might have increased. Because I'm guessing, at least that's the situation we see with most of our customers, the requirements didn't reduce at the same pace as the resources did. So the delta just increased. What does that mean for us? And that's the connection, a very generic connection, I admit, but the connection to outcome management. We still benefit as an organization from a holistic operating model, which actually helps us to achieve our targets, whatever they may be. Does it make sense so far? At least I see a couple of people nodding, so I'm guessing yes. So to deepen or to dive a little bit deeper on the connection to outcome management. In general, what we see with most companies we work with, everyone needs to achieve business outcomes. Business outcomes always needs to be able to be translated into euros to some degree. A very generic business outcome could, for example, be we need to stay the number one in our segment with the biggest market share in Europe and the USA while being more cost efficient. There you already see the connection. The topic, while being more cost efficient, before a crisis, it might have been a hygiene factor. Everyone talks about being as efficient as possible, but it wasn't so big on the radar as it is right now. So what we are doing with outcome management is actually we try to focus on 8 process outcomes. Those process outcomes are the ones which lie behind the idea of outcome management and are the basis of the framework of OKRs. And in reality, what we see behind those process outcomes again are specific behaviors. Behaviors we want our teams, our people, our leadership, basically our organization to actually do, to follow, to have as a natural rhythm in their daily working life. Let's take a look at those process outcomes. And don't worry, that's one slide we usually do have in a lot of trainings and coaching sessions as well, and we can spend like 20, 30 minutes just on that one slide, which we obviously won't do today. So these are the 8 process outcomes we identified behind the idea of OKRs and outcome management, but we identified 3 to exemplary showcase how outcome management and efficiency targets are connected. In general, OKRs manage to make a strategy consumable. We communicate in a very transparent way. That's a connection to efficiency targets. How? Usually what we see, efficiency targets are kept behind closed doors. Only leadership are privy to those efficiency targets. If you use OKRs and outcome management to some degree, you at least partially make efficiency targets a part of daily routine as well. You make them consumable as well. That way, you can enable alignment. Every one of you probably knows the OKR cycle with the different events. One of those events is the alignment phase. So within the alignment phase, we try to make sure that the needed contributions, horizontally or vertically speaking, are actually facilitated. The same can be applied to efficiency targets. Even though we see it very seldomly done in working reality, efficiency targets are something very much kept separate from our strategic targets. So the strategic targets might be to some degree transparent, but if we need to be more cost efficient, the details of that are very seldomly made transparent. So we can benefit in times of crisis from communicating our targets, our goals, and make them more consumable, foster an alignment around efficiency as well. And then in the end, we want to not only achieve saved euro, for example, we want to go down the KPI driver tree as with everything within OKRs and the outcome management idea. We want to leverage the numbers lower on the driver tree. You will see an example later on, but that benefits efficiency targets the same way it benefits any other strategic target. So what we are saying is OKRs can increase the likelihood of any goals and the achievement behind it, including efficiency targets. So one step back for those who haven't heard it or have seen that slide or someone of our team talking about it. We are talking about 3 basic artifacts in the context of OKRs, which are relevant for efficiency targets if you leverage OKRs as well. The first one is the objective. Very high level, we want to answer the question, where do we want to go? And that can include being more efficient. Then every objective obviously consists of multiple key results, which answer the question, how do I measure whether I got there, how close I am? And then there's the less obvious but very important third connection, the initiative, which just answers the question on what outputs am I working? So as an hypothesis, what are the tasks I need to work on, spend my limited resources on in order to achieve my goals? And there's the obvious connection. So if I got less resources to spend on initiatives, it only makes sense to have the cost efficiency, for example, as one input when I'm drafting my objectives and key results as well. Still make sense? All right. So for those online, I still see a couple of nodding heads. If anyone online has a question or wants to jump in, please use the chat. We do have an eye on that one. All right. So there's the first maybe new thing for some of you. Leveraging those 3 artifacts, you can already reduce output waste. Some of you might have listened to the panel discussion where Alessia coined that phrase or mentioned that phrase, which we actually coined. So when we talk about output waste, we mean every task, every output you're working on, which isn't directly or at least indirectly connected to an outcome. Every time you spend resources, and especially in times of crisis where the resources are limited, on outputs which are not having an effect for a customer or any other beneficiary, then you run the risk of creating waste. So what we see in most organizations still, like Eric pointed out this morning as well, even though maybe in our bubble we might think that agility is the one thing everyone does, it isn't. Most organizations still work with output portfolios. If you take a look at their highest level of portfolio, it's big programs, waterfall programs, which are very much output oriented, where you very seldomly can see a direct connection to an outcome. In that context, this output waste becomes very relevant if you want to save money, if you want to be more efficient. So how to do it might seem very simple, but a lot of great ideas tend to be like this. I nearly feel stupid saying it, but the connection to OKRs is let OKRs inform your portfolio prioritization. That's one thing we start working on with a lot of big companies right now, because if we talk to a portfolio department, they are status quo, very output oriented, but any one of those understands the benefit of being more outcome oriented there. So allocating your budget, your people, not just to big programs, but to outcomes behind it, and then link the programs afterwards. If you do it, it enables you to actually identify which of your output related tasks, your projects, can be linked to a key result in an outcome. And you identify the delta. So everything which can't be linked, I'm not saying that it's unimportant, but at least it should be a trigger for a conversation. That these are the topics you invest a lot of resources in, but which might not end up with an outcome which actually drives you step by step towards your vision. The next topic I mentioned, the OKR cycle. So there are a couple of things hidden in this OKR cycle which can help us achieve our efficiency targets as well. I'm not going into too much detail of the specific events, but we identify 3 touch points in the OKR cycle about which we want to talk and to which we want to tie the topic of efficiency. One is the drafting phase, the second is the alignment phase, and the third is the check-ins, so the execution. Let's take a look at the drafting and the connection to efficiency in times of crisis. First thing which is very important to understand in general, but as well when talking about OKRs in times of crisis, is drafting OKRs is a process. It's not, as we see in a lot of times before we jump in with a customer, it's not one meeting. It's not a 2-hour meeting. It's not a 4-hour workshop. In best case, it's a process. And it starts with collecting input. You want to actually collect all relevant input sources which might enable you to deduce a priority from. Then you start prioritizing because in a lot of cases, in most cases actually, as we said earlier, we got too many requirements and too little resources. So we need to prioritize those clusters of input sources. Then we are still not at the final drafting meeting. In best case, we do a pre-drafting. We identified in a lot of cases, we want to de-risk the final drafting session by actually getting to a more or less 70% level of the OKRs by drafting in very small groups. We take those 70% OKRs into the final drafting session, and only then we communicate all the topics. So how is it connected to OKRs in the times of crisis or efficiency targets? Most important topic is the input collection. We always try to envision OKR drafting as a big funnel, and you throw in every potential input source you can think of. That can be programs, that can be bottom-up input out of the teams, that can be a direct customer feedback or indirect customer feedback, and it should be KPIs and efficiency targets. And again, efficiency targets usually are measured with some of those KPIs, so there's a big connection. But by throwing your efficiency targets measured by KPIs in this funnel to be considered by everyone drafting in the company, or as many as possible at least, you will gain a huge benefit. You will be able to leverage the intelligence of the many and not just the few who know the efficiency targets. Because to be honest, every company we know tries to be very secretive about efficiency targets, but in the end, if you talk with whomever you meet on the floor in those buildings, Everyone knows there's an efficiency program running, but you don't leverage the intelligence and the ideas of the many in order to actually come up with the best things which help you achieve your efficiency targets. Then moving on, we mentioned KPIs already. So there is a strong connection between KPIs and outcome management, leveraging the framework of OKRs. Every company does have strategic KPIs, more or less transparent. They observe it over time. That's the classical KPI management. Hopefully, they identify trends which they like and want to foster, or don't like and want to mitigate. And one of those trends might be, we see operational costs at 100%. In the times of crisis, more than ever, we need to reduce this operational cost. So there's one strategic KPI. We see a trend which is basically no trend at all, but we need a trend downwards in order to make our business model work. So we can deduce a priority from this. So be more cost efficient. Very, very simplistic, but you get my meaning, hopefully. So where's the connection to the OKR framework? Here you see those same strategic KPIs and the trends and the deduced priorities as one input factor. You want the teams to actually, and the different units on all levels actually, to take into account when drafting OKRs. So in the middle, you see operational cost, the efficiency target, or one part of the efficiency target usually. If the team drafting this objective 2 takes it into account in this funnel logic, then they might come up with key results which actually measure cost per unit, revenue per employee, or raw material cost, depending on the topic they are working on. And then even one level lower, you might find that a customer success team or sales team picks that one up and moves even one step lower on the KPI tree and tries to improve on service revenue, which will in turn positively improve your operational cost, or at least cash in and cash out. That way, you can see that considering efficiency targets, the same with every other input, can actually be picked up by the OKR framework, and this way find their way into daily working life of the biggest part of your organization. So what you saw in there was very much the connection, and I'm hoping it's not completely redundant for most of you. That's the difference between leading and lagging indicators, and there's a connection to OKRs in times of crisis and efficiency targets again as well. Most organizations steer an efficiency target with just a lagging indicator, euro, so operational costs overall. If you go down to the people actually working and actually creating added value for you, not the leaders, the teams, they don't get any guidance from you telling them we need to reduce our operational cost. You leave them pretty much alone. And OKRs is one instrument which can deliver this guidance, but only if you understand this connection between leading and lagging indicators. So the lagging indicator is the operational cost. It's something you probably need to do a lot of things over a course of a longer period of time in order to, in the end, reduce the operational cost. So looking at an OKR cycle, that won't help you. Most OKR cycles are shorter than the time you need to actually reduce the operational cost. That way, what we are saying is apply the OKR logic of deducing the leading indicators leading up to a reduced operational cost to efficiency targets as well. So you might end up with 1, 2, 3, 4 levels lower on the KPI driver tree. You might end up with the reduced process cycle time in percent. In an optimal case, focused on maybe outsourced processes. Because in the end, if you reduce the time an external vendor needs to fulfill a process for which you pay him, then you might end up with needing to pay less for the same output. And that way, using OKRs, you might gain a lot of ideas and give more guidance to the people actually achieving your efficiency targets the same way you try to achieve your strategic targets. So far to drafting. Any questions or feedback regarding this? As expected, usually the case, right? So let's jump into the next point. We drafted OKR, so we know where we want to go and how we try to measure whether we actually got to the point where we need to go. Next step in the OKR cycle is aligning those goals. So what you see here is a screenshot out of our tool, the graph actually. On the left-hand side, every colored bubble represents an OKR set of one unit drafting OKR. Can be a team, can be a main department, can be a product, can be the whole of the organization. In the middle, you usually see the highest level of goals. And what you can observe on the left screenshot is actually taken live from a customer which we started working with. They drafted maybe kick-ass goals, but they weren't connected. These are islands which are not really connected to one another, neither horizontally nor vertically. After a couple of cycles, we managed to get to the point on the right-hand side, which is more a network organization of goals. So we see there are a lot of contributions needed in order to achieve my targets. And again, the connection to OKRs in times of crisis is, on the left-hand side, you can achieve part of your efficiency targets just looking at an individual unit. But we observe the bigger portion of your efficiency actually can be leveraged on the right-hand side, not by creating a local optimum, but by actually taking into account that strategy is usually never executed in a silo. So there are dependencies horizontally and vertically, and by actually leveraging the OKR cycle, you can make sure that as well, speaking about efficiency targets, you end up with a connected goal set. People get inspired by the things a unit left, right, up, or maybe in a complete other corner of the organization is working on in order to achieve their part of the efficiency targets. That can actually, again, be a huge benefit in the sense of leveraging the intelligence of the many. Instead of just telling people we need to reduce money, operational costs, and then trusting the leadership hierarchy to actually follow up on this. And you can bet on they don't talk as much as teams would talk if they use a proper software, for example, and gain the transparency of being able to take a look at all the other efficiency goals in the organization. And last but not least, the best drafted goal and the professionalized aligned goal still means nothing if you don't execute on it. So again, we see it a lot of times. People draft really good OKRs. They understand the idea behind the drafting and outcome orientation. But after drafting, they put the OKRs in a drawer, and then they only open up the same drawer at the end of the cycle. And then either you miraculously achieve them or you didn't. But you didn't actually use a big portion of the power of OKRs because it's a steering model. It's not just a goal drafting framework. It's an operating model with which you can steer how you achieve any target, including efficiency targets. So you're not supposed to identify all the different elements in those screenshots, but it's screenshots our check-in conversations module. And it helps me to actually explain why execution is so important. So what we want organizations to do, and we see, and Stefan will elaborate on that shortly, what we see, that's one of those behaviors which actually drives goal achievement. So if you actually set, for example, bi-weekly check-in meetings, which forces the team and enables the teams, the units drafting and working on the OKRs to actually follow up on the actions, you will be able to define two things. How confident are you that you will achieve those targets? And what's the progress? You will be able to actually report on impediments. You will be able to ask for support. And you can see the connections again. So if there's a connection in alignment, you follow up on this in a check-in as well. So what I'm saying is very basic, and it applies to OKRs in general, but to OKRs leveraging efficiency targets as well. Do the check-ins, because the best drafted OKRs won't mean shit if you don't execute on them. And in the end, that goes as well, and more specifically even, for efficiency targets. What we see in a lot of cases, efficiency targets are handled in some form of task force. So very secretly speaking, they might do check-in meetings in some form. They might not call it like this, but they definitely do, hopefully even on a daily basis, but it doesn't concern the whole company. So the people who actually work on the topics which will drive your efficiency are the teams, to some degree, to a big degree in our experience. So get the teams to actually do check-in meetings. Take a look at efficiency in parallel to your strategic targets and goals through the course of a whole cycle. And that's it already regarding the, sorry, yeah, shoot.
I was going to ask a quick question on the check-in meetings. My understanding here is not very solid. So the way I see it is if a team is self-driving their OKRs, that they understand they are motivated enough and they know what they are doing. And if they are able to define good OKRs, then I would expect that they are able to deliver them as well. And if during delivery they have impediments, like you said, they will come up and raise it. And then we are putting in check-ins. So isn't it a bit of an overkill? Also trying to micromanage?
Understood. Let me maybe sum up the question for those online. So there was a question regarding looking at an organization, a modern organization, actually having self-organized teams in which you trust to draft their OKRs and execute on them, and then in the end deliver on them. Wouldn't check-in meetings be an overhead or overkill? Could be. But one of the most important, simple but most important things we try to include in our coaching sessions with customers is the OKR events are not to be on top. In some cases, a drafting might be an on-top meeting, but especially the check-in meeting is a meeting which you can very sufficiently integrate in your existing meeting structure. So, for example, picking one example, a Scrum team is having dailies or every second day or weeklies. Department has a department weekly. So those meetings usually exist whether you do OKRs or not. And once you start with OKRs, integrate a check-in as an agenda top in those meetings. It doesn't need to be more than 15 minutes out of experience if you prepare it professionally.
But the check-ins are then done by the team themselves.
Yeah, sure.
They do the product owner, Scrum Master does the check-in. It's an agile thing, right?
Yeah, exactly. Check-ins are not primarily a reporting meeting. They are a meeting for the teams to follow up on what they set as goals for themselves. And the primary output can be that you can use the info gathered there to report, ask for support, or whatever else you need to inform stakeholders, etc.
But then we have this classic situation where we have those setups in place where the check-ins happen through either the agile rituals, either they do the check-in and the reviews, meetings, the sprint reviews. But then the feedback was like, if the portfolio is not checking in with us, then maybe nobody cares what we are doing, and then we are left on our own, and it doesn't seem like the objectives that we work on are important enough because nobody is looking at them.
I'm hoping you don't find me rude, but maybe that sounds like a bigger topic which we can definitely discuss after the session bilaterally. Everyone else, obviously, feel free to join, but I feel like we otherwise losing track. Yeah? All right. Okay, so that's it already for the look at the method point of view, how OKRs and the different elements, meetings, and artifacts in there can actually help you achieve efficiency targets as well. So right by now, you hopefully ask yourself, all right, we get the point, it makes sense, seems simple, even though very little organizations use it that way yet, but does it actually work? And in order to prove that point, I brought Stefan, who will give you a couple of facts and figures out of our research, which actually show that specific behaviors significantly can drive goal achievement, including achievement of your efficiency goals.
Thanks a lot, Philipp. Yes. And I saw that a few have joined afterwards online. So I'm Stefan, quantitative researcher at WorkPath. And Philipp just highlighted in the last couple of minutes how important it is to plan goals effectively and to deliver them. Now it's more important maybe than a year ago or 2 years ago. So basically, that was our motivation to say, like, okay, when it's now even more important to deliver these goals, how can we find out some insights that help our clients, again, our product, to become even better? So basically, what we're often talking about is like the left-hand side here. So we're talking about process outcomes, right? Are you aligning your goals during the planning weeks? Are you drafting your goal accordingly? And what the upper leadership and also your team in the end is talking about is delivering business outcomes. And OKRs are a tool for that, right? So what we basically wanted to do is to connect the left-hand side process outcomes that are manifested in applying certain behaviors, with the right-hand side, really seeing if these behaviors actually make a difference in delivering goals. So first, let's have a look what delivering goals really means. Like, that's an abstract term. You can define it like in different terms. So what we basically did, we had a look at 40,000 anonymized goals. What we can see there, that goal delivery, like during planning, right? You commit to a certain value and said, okay, that's a good priority to take on now. And we assume that we can deliver this. Maybe that's a stretch goal, maybe not. But usually you want to really deliver this goal, right? But what we can see is only around 19% are really a home run. They're really like the 100% or even more. Then often, like, you know of the term like stretch goals, around 70% or more. That's good. But that's also not something that's always achieved, right? So there's really a long left tail of goals that are maybe orphaned, maybe started and no progress at all because you defined like the wrong initiatives. And what we see is that 11% of all goals, of all these 40,000 goals, end up at 0% or even less. And what does this mean now? We have, to summarize, we have every fifth goal is like a home run. We have like a significant amount of goals that are achieved, but also a lot of them that are not achieved. If we're at times with like crisis, you definitely want to move in average your goals from the left-hand side up to the right, because that's what's most important now, right? And just a little thought experiment for you. All the super failed goals, how much monetary waste do you think this is creating? And let's assume you're working now in a company with 250 goals per quarter, which means doing OKRs, quarters, 250 goals. That's around 100 units. Could be departments, teams. A guesstimate. There's no real right answer, but how much money do you think is burned there? Any naive suggestions, maybe from the audience? I have an answer, but mine is also naive. 1 million? Okay. Now I'm like at Sotheby's. Who's up? Who's down? Up? Okay, up. Okay. How many? In the billions? Okay. As I'm a very conservative German person, I have like a very conservative estimate for this one. So my educated guess would be, okay, we have like 250 goals per quarter for a company, 100 units, as said. That's 1,000 goals per year, means 110 failed goals. 4 people working on it, 100K employee costs, makes around 11 million. And that's direct waste. That's not opportunity costs of value you've not created. That's just burned. And why do I think this is somehow reasonable? Just think of the following. You are in planning week and you all commit that this is an outcome worth achieving, and you say, okay, that's worth it, we are working on it. It's definitely not worth less than you put into the cost. Sometimes it's up 5%, 5 times the value you create, but that's already a conservative number. So you've seen it can create like millions of potential. If we find out a bit better, how can we apply certain behaviors that are effective to maybe drive us up a few percentage points in goal delivery? And if we find out this, then it's also a good argument in front of upper management, right? So, So what we focused on like now in the first step is, okay, what can you all do right in the state of planning, which is drafting goals and aligning goals. And we have like 12 different behaviors that we operationalize then quantitatively, but let's talk about behaviors in like a sense that one can understand, that one can apply from a day-to-day basis in drafting. Measuring outcomes with metrics, not milestones. We had a look at ownership, assigning ownership, sharing ownership in the team. So having like the accountability on multiple shoulders, committing for vertical outcome contribution to strategic goals, department goals, or horizontally to other team goals where you support them, focusing on few goals, starting early enough with drafting, having an enabled team member in there, access to an OKR coach, staffing enough people on there, allocating capacity, planning initiatives ahead of the goal start. So you already know, okay, what do we need to do? Now, what we then did is, okay, so we have like now these planning behaviors, as I've said, and we used anonymized feature usage in order to see like, okay, has this planning behavior been applied? And if so, to which degree in a certain attempt to deliver a goal? So when you're like, when a unit is drafting a goal, committing on it and clicking on activating, then it basically enters our anonymized pool of data. And then we can see, okay, they've like some goal was vertically contributing to another goal, kind of this degree of ownership assignment was there. And then we correlate this with the actual goal delivery. And what we will present here today is not the ultimate answer, but our current best understanding of what we have. And we will focus on the more certain findings we have and also the ones that positively influence goal delivery today. One concrete example for you, because that's a bit abstract and I'm maybe a bit deeper into the rabbit hole already. So one easier example, committing for vertical outcome contribution. We've heard it before from Philipp, how important this is, also in times of crisis. In your day-to-day planning, you would see if you apply this behavior by, you've talked to someone, you've said like in WorkPath, hey, we align to your goal, we're contributing this key result. Okay, this behavior is applied. For other teams, that's not. That's what we measure. And then we can see already on the very high level, okay, interesting. These goals that are vertically contributing other goals are having higher goal delivery in average. But that's just like one level of looking at it. What we basically want to do is, sorry, wrong direction. What we basically want to do is we want to be a bit more sophisticated and throw this into like a more mature statistical model where we have all effects and also where we control for external effects, like what in which year we've been, like our product also improved a bit, right? And what we want to tell you today is what we found is that assigning and sharing ownership usually ends up in 5 to 7% better goal delivery. Committing for outcome contribution, where vertical contributions are more important than horizontal contribution, brings you another few percentage points, 2 to 7%. Measuring outcomes in metrics usually correlates better with better goal delivery. And then we also find 2 more effects from behaviors, which is option to have like feedback from an OKR coach and starting with drafting earlier. Now you have some kind of baseline proof that says something about correlation. In case you're wondering, correlation doesn't imply causation. What's exactly like the dynamic behind this? We have like strong hypothesis around this from other research, from our industry knowledge that we have, but we're also engaging now with a qualitative researcher into active conversations at clients' sites where we want to understand what's exactly the dynamic behind. And if you had a look at the 5 different results, the behaviors that I've summarized, ownership, vertical outcome contributions, horizontal ones, and so on, they all are not exclusive to each other. So you basically see the more you apply of the good stuff, it helps you on average with goal delivery. Still, single goals are not, it's like not a guarantee. You're just doing everything right in planning week, and then you have 3 months of vacation. No, it will basically amplify, encourage certain commitment, accountability, and doing right things during the cycle. Just imagine vertical outcome contribution. Someone can help you better with resolving the big risks, the big blockers, because you've aligned before that this is a worthwhile priority to pursue. Yeah, and that's it from my side. And for this, I'll love to hand over again to Philipp for a quick sum up.
Thank you, Stefan. So we want to leave you with a couple of pointers, what we hope you take away from this session. First of all, efficiency targets can leverage the framework of OKRs. Outcome management can help as well with efficiency targets. We want to create a red thread from strategy through OKRs or outcomes down to initiatives even if we talk about efficiency targets. We can use OKRs to identify output waste by taking a look at our portfolio management, right? And let OKRs inform our portfolio prioritization. That way, already potentially a huge impact on your efficiency targets. We want to, and that's a very important topic, consider all relevant input sources. I cannot stress this enough. That's maybe the most important first step in all of this process. If you don't have the right input, it's very hard to derive the right outcome and come to the right output after all. Then we want to leverage the idea of leading and lagging indicators when drafting, not only with our strategic goals, but looking at efficiency as well. We want to align, more importantly, at least looking at goal delivery data vertically, but also obviously horizontally if we need support from a neighboring unit. We want to make sure that we do have ownership. So again, coming back to the idea of self-organized teams, right? Still, we see a statistically proven correlation between OKRs which do have a clear ownership and OKRs which are just floating, more or less, and we count on someone picking it up. So consider this when drafting next time, maybe as the last step. And last but not least, make sure that you don't just draft, but in the end, as Stefan said, right, the best planning phase means nothing in the end. As well, looking at efficiency targets and saved euros if you don't follow up on it and execute, leveraging the check-in conversations within the cycle. That's it. So we are basically, I see already 3 minutes over, right? So maybe only leaving you with one thing, and we can maybe jump on the question in a second. If anyone wants to, is interested in even more data, wants to be part of the research, because there was only the first big step, a lot more will follow. So just reach out to Anna on the left-hand side, Anna@WorkPath, easy to remember. Just shoot an informal message and we will get back to you.
Yeah. And one announcement, like we're releasing a white paper with like all the findings soonish. And there's, as Philipp just said, that's the first step. And we will want to we have a lot of, we'll have like a really deep knowledge base in like a year from now that really helps you to be better in goal delivery, to align better, and to connect the education that we do with like the data that helps you to position OKRs even better. We'll continue there. Thanks a lot.
Let's jump on that question for everyone who wants to stay. Whoever else, we won't think it rude if you leave.
Quick question, just to clarify. Vertical commitment means that on the team level, for example, we derive a goal that contributes to the head of department.
Exactly. So the question basically was the definition of vertical alignment. Yes, and the example you picked is completely right. So a team taken into account as input source when drafting, right? The funnel again takes into account maybe a higher up OKR on the next level, a department, a product, or maybe the organizational goal, and says in the end, when we achieve our OKR, we contribute to your key result. Because in the end, you have to think about the higher up you go in an organization, the less people actually work and create added value, right? So their role description is more setting the direction, enabling the people. So it's very important that the teams, the lowest level in the OKR hierarchy, so to say, actually does this alignment. Otherwise, setting organizational goal is just for communication purposes.
Exactly. And on the organizational level, you have several business units, but for this year, you highlighted only one because OKR is not focused. And then other 6 business units just cannot contribute to that directly. That's why cascading.
Yeah, it's never 100% approach, right? It's not aligned goals are bad, but you want some form of alignment. All right. Thank you.
Oh, there was another question. Oh. Yeah.
Sure, shoot.
Last question. All right.
Thank you. So at the beginning you talked about the crisis, but it's like give it from time. So how we implement OKR in the coming crisis versus if we implement OKR in normal times. Is there any differences that want to change the approach?
And maybe summing it up for the online audience as well. So the question was, is there a difference in implementing OKRs in times of crisis versus in non-crisis times? The simple answer is no. The implementation itself is no different. So the steps we would do to implement the process and the tools, like our software behind it, won't change. The effect it can have on achieving your efficiency targets, which are the usual effect of a time of crisis, they can be huge, but the way you implement it doesn't necessarily change. Maybe in the way you communicate it, and change management needs to change a little bit, but in general, the implementation steps are more or less the same. All right, but then, thanks.
Thanks a lot.